Well, hello, my friends, and welcome back to the Rewilded Wellness Podcast. I'm your host, Lydia Joy. And if you are new here, I want to orient you quickly because today's episode builds directly on the last two I released this year in 2026. In my first episode, The Shadow Crisis Beneath the Wellness Movement, we talked about the larger paradigm people are trying to heal inside of the overtreatment, the information overload, the loss of containment, and the way modern wellness has quietly inherited the same intervention first mindset as conventional medicine. And in my second episode, The Epidemic of Oversimplified Wellness and Why It Backfires, I took that conversation a step further and walked through an example of how people are like health influencers, experts, gurus, whatever. This one was an influencer. But a lot of people are doing this, are looking at single nutrient narratives. There's this reductionistic thinking. And of course, the influencer style certainty, uh, air quote certainty, that's really destabilizing people. And today I want to keep pulling on that thread because I named it in the last episode, but I want to go deeper into it because there's another layer. Before I go there, I want to briefly name a larger astrological context we're all living inside of right now. Pluto in Aquarius. Pluto entered Aquarius. It's going to be there until 2044. And you don't need to be into astrology to understand this. Pluto deals with power, control, truth, and what gets exposed when systems can no longer hold their infrastructure. Aquarius governs information, networks, technology, decentralization, and collective thought. So when Pluto moved into Aquarius and will be here for a while, we're going to see power struggles around information itself, like who controls it, who interprets it, who we're taught to trust. And this has already been showing up very clearly in health and wellness. And because of that, I'm watching this from a different lens than maybe you are because I'm sitting with many, many people. But, you know, um, people's nervous systems are just like fried by the velocity of information that's out there. It's insane. And we now have like the algorithms have replaced our embodied knowing, you know. A lot of people their trust is collapsing in the institutions that they once thought were the thing, right? We now have this like crazy over reliance on data without earned wisdom. Holy moly, it's disturbing. Um, and so with that in mind, like a decentralization of authority, it is necessary. However, because it's been a part of us for so long, it can feel very chaotic watching it kind of reorganize, right? Now, people have access to more information than ever before. It's insane, right? Like, I mean, I've lived 51 years on the planet, and the amount of information we have today that I didn't have when I was a kid, it's crazy. It's both awesome and terrifying all at the same time because people, feel less clarity than ever and more overwhelmed because of it. And one of the places that this shows up really destructively is we kind of got into this, like, I'm going to call it a study obsession, like scientific studies, the research. So in today's episode, I want to talk about how power now hides behind science. I mean, come on, some of us already know this, but studies are really being used as an authority instead of context, and a lot of people are ending up disconnected from their own biology in the process. This has been happening for a really long time. Now, listen, I'm not anti-science at all, you guys. I'm anti-outsourcing your inner authority, okay? And a lot of people keep saying this thing to me, and you'll hear it in the collective. I'm doing everything right when it comes to like people who are like trying to be on a health journey and clean up their lives, right? They think they're doing all the right things, right? I'm reading the research, I'm following the data, I'm following, blah, 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 whatever. And they're still feeling like stuck, like they're not getting where they want to go or where these results from studies and research promise them they could be. So if that's you, this conversation's for you. And if you ever felt like pressured to trust research or expert opinions that don't actually match your lived experience, and then you like kind of wonder like why nothing seems to land for you, stick around. Because when science stops being a tool and starts acting like, I want to call it a god, maybe authority, really, we have a problem. In Houston, there is a problem. Um, it's 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 about how science has started to be used for so long in a manipulative fashion and what that misuse is actually doing to people's bodies. Okay. Listen, studies were never meant to replace your earned body wisdom. Okay. Your inner knowing. They're designed to explore very specific questions under very specific conditions. And they isolate variables on purpose. They even reduce complexity on purpose because what they're trying to do is look for patterns, not prescriptions. And so a study can help us understand a mechanism, and it can point towards something really worth exploring, and they really can add context to a larger picture. But studies were never meant to become these like I guess, turned into universal rules for every human body, which is what people are using them for. They're never meant to override lived experience, and they're never meant to be used as like some kind of permission slip for basic biological needs even. And they were never meant to be consumed out of context. Definitely not filtered through social media. Holy moly. And even like used to tell people how they should be living, like in the context of the last podcast episode I did with that person who talked about the vitamin D. That's not science. That's authority wearing like wearing a lab coat. Somewhere along the way, for all of us, research stopped being treated like a tool and started being treated like truth itself, right? And when something becomes like, quote, truth, questioning it doesn't feel curious anymore. It starts to get risky. You feel wrong when you question something that becomes more normalized and mainstream, right? It's almost like you feel irresponsible if you do that. Like it feels like you're doing something wrong. And I see this all the time too. You know, now people are saying all kinds of things to me, right? Like, you know, my doctor says the research proves this, or like, I read the studies and they say this is essential or whatever. But like, people are even saying, like, I want to research this myself before I, commit or whatever, right? And there's an uncomfortable reality where people aren't actually reading studies, they're reading claims about studies. They're like absorbing headlines or captions or summaries or talking points, not methodology. There's definitely going to be funding bias uh, involved, and the applicability of like a study that the way it's being misused is astronomical. Okay, so even if you or somebody read a study, maybe a lay person, or even not a layperson, and just maybe someone who's not a researcher, but they're a practitioner. Most research was never designed to answer the question people are using to justify it, right? It's like, let me prove that this thing exists, or let me base what I do on the studies. It's wild, right? We know that they're narrow by design. They're very short term. A lot of studies do not have long-term data at all. They don't have follow-up. I mean, there are some long-term studies, but not very many. A lot of them are done under artificial conditions. A lot of them use animal models. Sometimes they perform studies on populations that don't resemble real human lives. It doesn't make them all useless. It just makes them incredibly limited. And the problem is what happens when those limits are ignored. Like research starts replacing discernment. And when discernment gets outsourced, we lose our footing. So when a health narrative is framed as science-backed, and this has happened so many times, you guys, like how many times have we been told by the science that this thing is true, and then years later it was disproved, right? Like, because we got so black and white about it. And it just started to become like whisper down the lane, right? So if your body doesn't respond well to whatever the health narrative that's framed by science, like, I don't know, there's so many of them. There's MCT oil, for example, for crying out loud, like it's just, that's not something I will ever do because it doesn't intuitively make any sense to me. I don't care how much science is behind it, right? Like, we've got so many health narratives that are framed from these like science-backed backdrops, right? People then don't start to say, maybe this doesn't apply to me, right? They sort of have this inner like assumption that something's wrong with them because the narrative that's good for all isn't working for them, right? Like it's subtle sometimes. Not everyone buys all into it, but it can be subtle. And the more that happens, the more it's just like, kind of a mind F, right? So people start making all these weird assumptions, like they're doing it wrong, or maybe they need to do this thing longer, or whatever it is, okay? And this is how people end up overriding their own physiology in the name of like thinking they're being responsible. And honestly, this is where the nervous system gets trapped, right? Because your body's sending signals of discomfort or tension or fatigue or that word we all love, dysregulation. But the mind has been trained not to listen. So now, because, the authority is living outside of the body and being outsourced to a study, this isn't happening in a vacuum, by the way, because we live in this time where institutions, are the ones that got us here, but now everyone's losing trust in them, right? So people are reaching for something solid and they're looking for research or studies or, they're trying to anchor themselves because we're like, okay, who do we even trust anymore? And so, studies aren't always relevant, but they sound definitive, right? So people are looking for that. And wellness culture has definitely learned how to capitalize on this. For sure. Like a study will get cited, a claim will get simplified, maybe a personal transformation story gets attached, like that one we did last week. Right. And then somehow, something gets organized around the study and now you're buying a supplement or now you need some new protocol or whatever. Right. And suddenly people feel like they're supposed to comply. This is like how all the trends get started. Even when maybe your body is like quietly saying no somehow, but you can't hear it, right? I spend an enormous amount of time helping people unwind the fear this creates. Okay? People aren't incapable and they're not uneducated. However, we have been trained to distrust our own feedback, and there is a real cost. And it's not just that some studies are bad. It's not even that research gets misused. It's how much energy gets burned up managing like the fear and the self-doubt instead of just like being available for your own healing. So it turns into a whole thing, right? People can spiral and fixate and overcorrect, second guess. And guys, that stuff, it costs you time, it costs minerals, it costs nervous system capacity, it costs trust. And then again, we wonder why things don't stick. Okay. So let's be clear, research is meant to inform, not dictate. Okay. Science is meant to serve, it's not meant to override our own discernment and wisdom. Okay. And studies and data without context, it's not going to turn into wisdom for you. So when we confuse information with some kind of authority or anchor or definitive clarity, we're not getting better outcomes. We end up getting more confusion. And sometimes we don't know that for a really long time. So, oh man. So it brings us to the next layer, because once you understand how research is being misused, it becomes very clear why this can backfire, especially in people who are already under, major nervous system surveillance, right? Like threat detection mode. Excuse me. So let's take this out of theory and into the body, because first of all, nobody's body is going to heal in an abstract, right? Like you heal in context. And I feel like this study obsession, this certainty culture, the intervention first mindset starts to quietly sabotage people, even when they're trying their hardest to do the right thing. The core issue becomes like people are constantly responding to inputs, stressors, environment, history, all at the same time. Real bodies are adaptive systems, okay? They're not controlled experiments. So when we start to organize our health around these isolated data points, and you guys, we might not even realize we're doing this, but it is happening all the time behind the scenes, right? Like lab values, like even how the lab definitively determines something. Oh man. I don't want to go there today, but like then there's expert claims, right? If we organize around these things as law instead of around the state of our own system, this is where things can really go south and fall apart. The first thing that happens is kind of like this loss of coherence. People start doing things that technically might make sense on paper, like even just with vitamin D, for example, but it doesn't make sense together as a whole. Okay. So then what can happen is, all right, we use a study, we decide a thing, we choose an intervention, but we're doing it in this myopic way. Maybe we're doing it to correct a number, such as the vitamin D example, because it's top of mind because I did it last week. Right. But then now we need another study to offset the side effects that we're not recognizing are coming from the action we're taking on the first study. Okay. And then another to address something else and something else and something else. It's the same game that's played in allopathic, where they keep putting you on a medication and then you have symptoms and then you get another medication and another medication. But now we're doing it and it's more slippery and more sneaky, especially if it's around like determining what nutrients we need and what supplements and what products and, scientific things we're supposed to be doing with our lives, right? Like it just gets carried away and there's activity that we're all doing, but it doesn't make sense anymore. There's no sequencing. People are, putting forth effort to do something for themselves, but there's no containment. And so they're like taking action and making movement, but there's no actual direction that makes any sense entirely. So from the body's perspective, this is not care. It's just noise. And noise is stressful. Now, the second thing that happens is that nervous system tightening, okay? because the body's now being asked to adapt constantly to new inputs that come from these studies, new rules, new expectations, new fears, without ever being allowed to settle. So then every signal becomes something to manage, all our sensations, we have to interpret them. You know what I mean? And this is like not healthy awareness, it's vigilance, right? So we all know a nervous system in vigilance is not available for repair. It's going to be prioritizing survival. Okay. And then the third thing is like resource depletion. So because healing requires resources, charge, voltage, minerals, we need to have enough energy. We need to be sleeping well. We need to have digestive capacity, emotional bandwidth. When we get, maybe some people spiral, but maybe some people just second guess. Maybe some people just in the back of their minds have these like minor fears going on about like decisions that they're needing to make for their health, right? It's like this low grade infection in the back of your mind, right? Like we could call it that. That's all going to be burning up the same resources you need. And I don't think people realize how expensive this is physiologically to live in constant evaluation mode. Because even all these healthy interventions cost something. And when they're layered on top of stress, uncertainty, self-distrust, your system starts leaking faster than it can rebuild, okay? And this is why people often feel like they're doing more and getting less. And then the final thing I think that happens is the loss of trust. And this is very subtle and it can be a little bit devastating because when your body reacts poorly to something that was science backed, people don't question the framework, they question themselves. They override signals, they might stay on something longer than their body can actually tolerate. They might push through reactions because they're told it's necessary, which may or may not be true, right? They ignore intuition because it doesn't have a citation. Holy Moses. That one gets me. So over time, what this is doing is eroding the relationship between the person and their very own body. And a body that isn't trusted doesn't soften. What does it do? It braces because it has to adapt to being overmanaged instead of actually listened to. All right. And none of this may look very dramatic at first, right? It's like we just think, okay, well, we're just trying to be thorough. We're just trying to make sure we're doing things right, getting the best information, But over time, our systems become fragmented from this and the energy gets scattered and regulation becomes harder, healing stalls. This is happening in individuals, in groups, in communities, in the online space, and in health and wellness culture, in culture. So there's like a very big, large scale ripple effect going on around this. And people in individual bodies, you and me, are often concluding that something is fundamentally wrong with them. I can't tell you how many different pendulum swings I've watched occur in the health and wellness space since I've been in this work. It's a shit show. And the ramifications are wild, okay? I'm just over here like, how do we navigate the fallout of all of this? And I have to do that with people. I have to sit with people who are doing things because, it became the narrative and it's not appropriate for them, So our systems have been under siege because of this, right? And a lot of people are getting that to that point where they're just like, I've tried everything. I'm doing everything right. I've done so much work. I guess I just have to live with this, right? Like this is what I'm hearing all the time from people. And, the reality is if we keep trying to correct ourselves and find a new study and find a new study and find a new thing and a new thing and a new thing and a new thing, science back, blah, 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 holy moly, like that's not very coherent, right? It's really intense. The body is going to sort things out when the inputs match your capacity. When the timing aligns, like when simplicity replaces excess. Like when your nervous system's allowed to stand down. And none of this is going to be visible in a study. Like how could it be, right? So if we don't name this pattern, and I feel like I've seen it for so long that I feel like I got to say it out loud because I have so many people coming into me dealing with the ramifications of this. And people are blaming themselves for outcomes that were never possible inside the framework they were given. And they're doing it with too many things at once. And that's the real backfire. You can hear my passion because I care deeply about this. It's so frustrating to watch because it's not first, do no harm. So if constant correction doesn't work and chasing certainty backfires and more information doesn't equal healing, what actually does? This is where we have to zoom out because real healing doesn't happen through domination of the body. We each have to have right relationship with our own body and our own ecosystem, our own inner ecosystem. Okay, so I'm going to say this as many ways as I can, as many times as I can for a little while longer. Our bodies are not machines to be optimized. They are living systems trying to organize in response to conditions. And anytime the conditions change, your body adapts. So if you keep changing the conditions all the time, you have to adapt. This is intelligence. It's not pathology, you know? So from this perspective, the goal is no longer just to fix the body. It's to create the conditions that allow the body to reorganize. And this is where a higher expression of Pluto in Aquarius comes in. Pluto doesn't just destroy systems. It exposes what no longer holds life. And Aquarius doesn't just distribute information, it asks us to decentralize authority outside of us. And so together, when they're at their highest expression, they're going to invite something radical together, which is a shift away from external control toward collective and individual sovereignty, grounded in awareness, not ideology. So in health, this means moving out of like, tell me what to do. Tell me what's right. Tell me what the data says I should be doing, right? And instead into like, what is my body actually responding to right now? I had a client who thought she had TMJ. And when we dug into what was going on in her life, she was listening to the news like 24/7. I mean, some of us are doing that right now with Instagram or whatever social platform you're on, Facebook groups, or I don't even know what TikTok. I don't know what people are doing. 82 groups, forums. I don't know, and you're like, if you're scanning and trying to listen to the news, your body's responding to that. It definitely is. Okay. So we need to be asking like the state of our own system, right? What does regulation look like for me? Not in theory. I don't need to read it everywhere else. I need to sit down and look at myself, right? We have to start asking different questions instead of like, well, what supplement do I need? Like for this thing, I'm going to go to the health food store. where I buy like some produce and some other things, and there's a whole supplement section. And I overhear this all the time. And this, one person is like doling out supplements as if they were medications, and like, oh my gosh. But here's the thing, like they don't know the context of your life. The real question is like, what is going on in my life? Like, what are the conditions I'm under that are shaping this response? And we definitely shouldn't be asking like, what does the research say I should override? Like, we have to ask our own bodies, like, okay, what am I trying to conserve right now? What am I trying to protect? What am I bracing against? Right? And then, and the other question, a lot of people are like, how do I correct this really fast? What's the quick fix? I don't want to feel like this anymore. What do I do? But that's not the right question. Like we need to understand what our own systems need. What does my body need right now? So I can like soften, so I can like not brace, so I can stabilize. And you might not intellectually know, but your body knows, and it's definitely trying to tell you. And it will tell you if you shift away from something and you automatically like relax, you'll know. It will show you. Right? But you have to, it's slower and it's real because you have to pay attention. All right? And that can not be standardized at all. There's no way it could be. So an ecosystem lens also understands something that modern wellness forgets. Like, we don't heal from read a study, do the input, change the thing. Like, there's always going to be like shifts and regressions. There's going to be like ebb and flow, right? Like you're going to start to make a change, and then your body has to reorganize around the change. And it could be a good thing. And it may decide, oh, we're going to allocate resources now that we have them to some old healing that you didn't do 10 years ago or something, right? Like, and your body decides, oh, now we can deal with this. Right? And that can feel like a regression, but it's really just a necessary thing your body has to take care of. But you might not like it, right? So we just keep bypassing these kinds of real biological shifts that we need to have. It doesn't mean your foundation failed if you really are laying one when you have minor regressions. It's just a responding to some new information, and just like a garden. You can have sunlight, water, soil all in place and still need to adjust things to some degree here and there when there's like major weather changes or stressors in the environment or whatever. All right. So we get to have more coherence, my friends. And this is where the Pluto and Aquarius actually becomes liberating, because when the power no longer lives outside of you in any single authority or a bunch of seeming authorities, like a protocol or a study or an expert or a guru or an algorithm or whatever is going on outside of you that's talking about health as if it knows more than you, Pluto in Aquarius becomes liberating because it returns to relationship between you and your body, between information and discernment, and between support and pacing. Science still belongs in the story, you guys, and so does research, and so does data. It all still valid. But it's not we shouldn't pedestalize it anymore. Okay? It's just a tool. They're tools. They're tools. You don't make tools a god. You know what I mean? So we don't want to reject knowledge. We just need to learn how to contextualize it. Right? Let the information inform without letting it dominate. let research guide us without letting it override us, and to allow ourselves to let wisdom emerge from lived experience, our own lived experience. That's what I wish more health guides talked about. Truly. Not like they're on a stage, but like they're genuinely living and sharing and guiding, right? Because this is what actually works. So another piece of this would be like really learning how to restore our own inner authority without rejecting science. Of course, we have to like understand what good science versus crap science is. That's a whole nother thing. But, um, you know, I don't want us to swing the pendulum all the other way and just like throw the bathwater out with the baby or whatever that saying is. Um, because the real work is just really restoring inner authority alongside of any information outside of us. You know, it doesn't mean we ignore it. It just means we discern better. Because a lot of people, there's like, I don't need any of that stuff. I'll do whatever. And that's fine. I mean, you have every right to choose that. But like, obviously, if you're on a health journey and you have chronic health issues and, that's not getting you anywhere, you know, um, you may want some outside guidance, right? Like, I think a lot of people throw it out because they just like get exhausted from this whole charade, right? But your body gets to be part of the decision-making process. So that's where all of this really starts to make more sense when we get out of the like pedestalizing of it all, okay? And then we get away from constantly feeling stuck, Um, right? Because, like, we still believe that if someone has credentials and a big platform and a large following and they're constantly citing studies or they sound really confident, we kind of silently think it's like they're more right or it must be true or whatever, right? Um, but then silently inside, if our lived experience doesn't match the narrative, then we feel like something's wrong with us. That's the conditioning. That's the problem. That's what I'm here to talk about. So when we restore our inner authority, we unlearn that reflex to override our body in the name of being responsible. We learn how to notice, you know, uh, and get more intuitive about this. Like when something helps short term but destabilizes long term, right? Um, when a recommendation technically makes sense but doesn't land, and I'm constantly seeing that with people. And sometimes a protocol, like, you might not be ready for it, you know? Sometimes your system needs less, not more. Sometimes you have to pace yourself before you can handle as much as you might think or like, right? Anyways, most people need help relearning all of this, you know? Because we've all been secretly kind of like conditioned to trust the science and the numbers and the protocol and the data and the expert. And I don't know if we realize how much it's like laying in the backdrop for all of us. So we have to relearn how to trust our own internal feedback, and that takes time and that takes containment. So when knowledge is shared, authority is contextual. So I think it's really important to talk about this more. Anyways, I could go on and on and on, but I just feel that science works best when it supports reality and not when it tries to dominate. So we can choose to work with it that way in our own lives, each and every one of us. And when our inner authority really comes back online, man, I tell you what, something totally shifts and you just stop chasing and spiraling and needing certainty at all costs. and your body has enough space to finally respond to things. So it's really powerful to work with this in your own life. If you feel like it's been something that's kind of niggling in the backdrop for you. I personally work with this, in my own practice. Like if you resonated with this, if you recognize yourself in the confusion, the over researching, any of the second guessing, that feeling that you've tried so many things and still don't feel settled, this is exactly the space my work is designed to meet, because I'm not working through symptom suppression or any kind of rigidity. The way that I work is through organization, pacing, and relationship. And the data that I am using is really to get a clear lay of the land that's personalized to the person, not another public opinion or a trend or anything, right? Like it's more to understand you, where you're at right now, right? And that's what matters, because then we can prioritize that, sequence the support in a way your nervous system can tolerate, and build consistency over time, not intensity. So this work is especially for people who have had chronic health concerns, felt like your healing process has been very slow. You feel very overwhelmed by conflicting information. Maybe you don't even really trust your body the way maybe you used to, or you would like to. You've tried a lot of what you thought were the right things without lasting results, right? Like you feel like you need guidance and perspective, not more noise, but containment. So if that's something you're ready for, something that's relational, grounded, and paced, you can find all the details about minerals and microbes on my website. The link is also below. And check it out. See if that's something that you're ready to jump into. You don't need to figure this out alone, and you don't need tons of information from all over the interwebs. You need a way forward that actually honors how your body is presenting right now and how you've adapted, and, allow it to be personal to you. All right, guys. Well, listen, thanks for tuning in. I wanted to point out another shadow in the wellness culture today, and I hope you found it helpful and had some takeaways. Until next time, stay wild and stay well.